Hello and welcome to session 292 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we will be discussing the second part of the video, Deconstructing Bostroms' Classic Argument for AI Doom by Nora Belrose. Nora Belrose is still the interpretability lead at adversarial, and Lance Bush is still this video blogger that we introduced last time. And this is a second part of the 4-hour video, starting at the 1 hour and 39-minute mark. So first, I would like to yet another time say thank you to Nora Belrose for critically examining the arguments for AI safety. I think that is very, very important work, and I really appreciate that she takes the time to do this. In particular, because when I try to give a reply to this, it is sometimes quite hard for me to staying truth-seeking, and I really honestly want to do that. If AI will not cause doom, then I decide to not believe that AI will cause doom, like the litany of Tarski. And sometimes when you are responding to each sentence and each claim, it easily becomes very adversarial, where there is a claim that could perhaps be interpreted in different ways, and then you choose you have to choose one of them to respond to, and that doesn't always get the right one, and that becomes too adversarial. Also, for the obvious reason that Nora and I probably have very strong moral disagreements, and that can also be very adversarial, and that's why I want to say thank you. And even that is hard. I can say things that I think sound nice, that she's I think the way she's engaging with skeptics and trying to examine this kind of thing is much more than almost everybody else is doing. But if I try to say that, yeah, you're doing better than 99.9% of the people who are building the omnicidal doom machine, then that kind of sounds like damning with faint praise. I'm not really sure I have a conclusion on this. I just want to say that, and I think in another world, I think Nora and I could be good friends if she just stopped trying to build this AI. So, when I published this video on YouTube, Nora made some comments, and I'd like to answer those. She left 4 comments on YouTube. Unfortunately, when I do this video, I put some of the comments in gold boxes, and she didn't quite respond to any of those. And she didn't also respond to the central point, which is of course a bit sad. Here I have repeated the central point from last time in somewhat larger letters. But I can't help myself, so I'll still spend some time to answer these points, her questions, even though I do feel that they are kind of somewhat irrelevant. So the first was when I made some claims about what Nora thought we could interpret from Bostroms' epistemic state. I said that Nora Belrose said that recently he's seemed more optimistic, and the fact that he's not working on AI safety implies that he thinks the risk is less than 99.99%. Nora objected to this, and that wasn't precisely what she said. It's not that it is evidence that he's more optimistic, just that the book is strong evidence that he thinks utopia is a plausible outcome, and that means his p-doom is much less than 99.99%. To me, this is a very minor difference, and maybe I slightly misrepresented. I'm sorry. This isn't a major point for me. So that's one example. And now I'm going to give another example. And that is one thing that Nora said in the presentation is that Bostrom claims that evil superintelligence is very likely. And Nora Belrose says, yeah, she was just using the term loosely. And I think this kind of thing is fair enough, right? Here, I've made a minor mistake, and she made a minor mistake. No big deal, right? I do in fact think there is a substantial deal here, because I have a strong amount of model uncertainty in this subject. Nick Bostrom does too, for that matter. Nora Belrose in her video is extremely confident in a lot of questions, and that creates an asymmetry here, in that if you are very uncertain, then minor errors probably doesn't matter very much. But if you are extremely certain about something, then when you accept, yeah, okay, I made a minor error, that should really make you a lot less confident that you are not making other kind of errors. So that's why I think it's I make small errors and they don't matter, and Nora makes small errors and they do in fact matter. Another general overall theme is perhaps exemplified by the next the next topic, where she says there are several kinds of moral realism, and the kind of thing that she's talking about is an extremely specific and strong kind of realism, like the most ultimate moral realism that says that it necessarily leads to increased motivation, and that is like perhaps the most extreme kind of moral realism. And I don't actually think that this is particularly relevant, because it has very large implications for AI safety if it doesn't necessarily increase motivation, but just, sometimes does it. And like a small push in that direction could have substantial implications. I also don't think that you need to 100% buy the absolute strongest kind of moral realism to need to hear arguments like the orthogonality thesis. There's a lot of people who lean towards moral realism, and they may be interested in this argument. So this kind of like looking at the most extreme philosophical positions instead of the actual thing that people think, I think is a theme that we'll be seeing more in this video. And of course, she doesn't answer like some of the other questions for like it seems like they haven't met Lance Bush and Nora Bellows haven't met people who believe in a physical God, and that's kind of strange because there is someone in the comments who do that, and they also haven't heard about anyone who believe in safety through moral realism, and that's also strange because it seems there's someone in the comments who does believe that. And of course the Phil papers, they survey, they have like the opposite interpretation of me of how many people lean towards moral realism. The next issue is this picture, this beautiful picture that they have as a thumbnail. I said that was ironic, and Nora Bellows asks why. She confirms it is indeed AI made, and she can't exactly see it's ironic, right? It's a nice thing, and AI makes us build nice things. And like, I'm a technological optimist, and I agree this is a nice thing, and I hope for AI to give us many nice things. The only thing I don't actually want AI is to de-empower and kill everyone, right? But let me try to explain about what the irony is. So here's from Wikipedia. Dramatic irony provides the audience with information of which characters are unaware, thereby placing the audience in a position of advantage to recognize their words and actions as counterproductive or opposed to what their situation actually requires. So how does this fit into this particular discussion? Well, you can imagine that this is happening on a stage where there is an audience, which is like the general public, and the general public, they actually really
I've lost your sound, sorry.
Oh, you lost my sound? Interesting. Anyone else also?
It's fine. I can hear him.
So I think, Chris, it's only you who lost my sound.
Chris, can you hear us?
Chris, you can't hear anyone. So that is your sound. Sorry, Chris. We can still hear you, but yeah. Okay, so the general public is not as optimistic as Nora Belrose. Of course, she's leading this organization, AI Optimists, right? So most people do not trust AI. And so if you consider this as happening on a stage, then the audience does not trust the AI, but there's a character in the play, which would then be Nora, who does not realize that you can't trust the AI. And then this character argues that, oh, AI is going to give us a lot of wonderful things, like this picture. It's going to be a really wonderful future we have with this AI, and argues that actually this person could not give the good arguments for this future, could not paint such a beautiful picture of the future AI utopia. But fortunately, the AI could, and you can trust the AI because the AI says you could trust it, right? And the audience recognize that this is a faulty that the fact that the untrustworthy AI tells you that it's trustworthy, that's an argument that doesn't carry. And so the entire audience just, oh no. And that is in fact what provides this kind of dramatic irony. So there was one other comment I'd like to, this was Lau Main, who asked Nora Belrose a couple of questions, and I was just sent this just almost at the last minute, so I didn't have much time to think about this. But the first question is, that what is the difference in behavior we can expect between AIs with and without goal realism? Like, imagine that you have an AI with an explicit goal, like maximizing paper clips, and we have something like ChatGPT. What's the difference in behavior that we should expect to see? And this, as far as I can tell, the answer that Nora Belrose gives is very evasive and doesn't give any kind of examples, and again goes back to this kind of very extreme philosophical maximalist goal realism view, where it has to be an extremely strong philosophical sense that these goals exist. And I think it's possible to, actually build a paperclip maximizer that will try to make paperclips, and that kind of concept might not satisfy the most extreme philosophical requirements, but there is certainly a thing like a paperclip maximizer that has the goal to create paperclips. The second question is, what difference do we expect to observe between scheming and non-scheming AIs? And unfortunately, I don't think this question, it's a good question, but it doesn't cut reality on the joints with my belief, because I think actually we don't have any clue about how to build a non-scheming AI. So if all the AIs we are seeing are, I think most likely either all the AIs we're seeing are scheming or none of them are scheming. So that means that we can't make any kind of comparison, because if they're all scheming, then you can't do this kind of thing. The final comment on the YouTube video was the fact that the Belrose-Bush trichotomy, that the orthogonality thesis is either trivial, false, or unintelligible. She said that in the first part of the video we were only talking about that it was trivial, and she's objecting that in the later part we'll see about whether it is also sometimes false and unintelligible, and that is what we're going to go through now when we actually get to the video. So let's have a look at that. So the first thing is Yudkowsky's strong orthogonality thesis, which is a different claim from Bostroms. It is as follows. The strong form of the orthogonality thesis says that there's no extra difficulty or complication in the existence of an intelligent agent that pursues a goal above and beyond the computational tractability of that goal. And that's a somewhat strange description. What does it mean, difficulty in the existence? That seems like what kind of difficulty is that? And in the article, Yudkowsky explains that this contrasts with inevitabilist, like a philosophical position that you would call inevitabilist, which could make claims such as no matter what AI you build, it will only pursue its own survival, or if you make it pursue a stupid question, then it will just reject it as being stupid and pursue valuing of all sapient life, or something like that. So that's the kind of philosophical difficulties that the strong orthogonality thesis rejects. This is related to the concept, the vastness of mind space. So this is the image that Yudkowsky used in his original article on Less Wrong as part of the sequences, as this huge space that minds in general could inhabit. So if you consider this like 1,000,000 bits wide, then if you have a claim that says some mind have a particular property, there exists a mind that has some kind of property, then you get a lot of chances for this claim to be true, because the mind space is so vast, and a lot of chances for the opposite claim that in this vast space no minds of this kind exist, has a lot of chances to be false. So that's like a framing. Certainly you can choose about the space of minds, but an obvious question is, when is this useful? And Yudkowsky claims that this is useful for not so much thinking of AIs as something that is very close to humans, but just with like a single change in some way, but just saying that like it could be it's like a much wider space. And when Nora Belrose explains this, the way she explains the vastness of mind space is by saying literally that there could be an AI that is just like me, except, and then gives some other example. And I think that is precisely the framing that vastness of mind space is trying to snap you out of. She further claims that this vastness of mind space means we should be really uncertain about what the AI's actual values are. And I don't think that follows at all, because if you have some kind of procedure for finding a narrow target, then finding a narrow target in something that is in a space that is like a million bits wide is actually something that we do all the time. This is something that is in general pretty easy. I don't think you can at all infer from the vastness of mind space that if you have an AI that's been built in a particular way, that you should be more confused about that.
Hey Soren,
Yep.
this is it's just that I don't really feel like our normal format is the best way to have this discussion today, because it's like you giving the presentation and then us having a non-recorded discussion, a debate discussion regarding it, because there is, we are in effect like having a discussion that's supposed to include Nora because she'll watch the video,
Sure.
right? So it's like what she actually sees is you giving the presentation, but not the actual discussion. So it feels, I don't know, like that would result in us talking past each other.
That's a good point. And like I hope that you will also push back on what I'm saying and like be Nora's advocate in that sense. So I suggest that we just also record the rest of the discussion, if that's also fine with you.
Yeah, sounds good for
sure.
me.
And I could also see in the chat that Ali had some objections to my objections to the irony thing. I think that we'll basically just do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems. I don't want to say it seems petty, but it's like not really. Doesn't really matter like who wins that particular debate. With that regards to dramatic irony or that particular slide, it doesn't seem to advance AI safety.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is like the gold boxes. I think it's like from my point of view, I would prefer that we only discuss the gold boxes, and I recognize that like if you object very much to some of the others, then that's of course fair enough. But I think basically the things that are not gold boxes, in particular the lightly colored boxes, are quite irrelevant. Yeah. So I'll continue with the presentation. And the next issue is, okay, we have the strong orthogonality thesis. What can we conclude from that? And Eliezer Yudkowsky makes two claims from this. One, that it is in fact possible to build a nice AI. This vastness of mind space includes AIs that are nice. It also, unfortunately, claims that if you screw up while you're trying to build a nice AI, then you don't get some philosophical complication that means that the AI will just automatically decide to be nice instead. So that's the thing you don't get. And Nora seems to explicitly disagree with this and say we can't infer anything from this. And I'm somewhat confused. She doesn't explicitly refer to these two claims. So I am in fact unsure whether Nora agrees with these two claims or not. She is saying something somewhat stronger, that Eliezer Yudkowsky basically assumes that we are sampling randomly from mind space, and Eliezer Yudkowsky seems to, in the text, very strongly to reject that, and I also think that I really can't find anywhere where Eliezer does anything that remotely seems like he is assuming this. The strong orthogonality thesis isn't actually, it has been changed somewhat. It used to be saying that there's no extra difficulty or complication in creating an intelligent agent. And that was in fact Nora Belrose who argued that this was wrong. And Eliezer Yudkowsky agreed, and then he changed that. And this is like how this is supposed to be, right? You point out an error, and then it's changed, and that's wonderful, right? I think I would also agree that creating it is more difficult when you're talking about something like corrigibility, which is a very special kind of really strange consequentialist kind of goal. And that is really strange, and I can see making that in practice is probably going to be really hard. But this is only kind of my intuitions. I don't truly understand this, and this is quite what Nora explains, and I haven't found the Twitter thread where she and Eliezer Yudkowsky discussed this. So
but what I was very confused on what the existence of that there is no extra difficulty or complication in the existence of an intelligent agent, so on and so forth. What would that even mean? I assume the arbitral page actually has that definition. Did anyone check?
It has the definition, but here Eliezer Yudkowsky is giving two examples of this kind of complications, philosophical complications, and saying this is the kind of claims that do not in fact exist. That all claims of this.
So is it like an existence proof? It's an existence proof.
This is how it's stronger than the orthogonality thesis, in that it's the original orthogonality thesis just says that intelligence and goals are orthogonal, and this says that there's a special kind of entanglement of these two that doesn't exist, and that is this kind of philosophical entanglement, where of course the second kind is the one that is really relevant for moral realism, because a moral realist would say this is untrue. A very religious person would say that even if you try to make an AI optimized for paperclips, then it would realize that God exists, and then it would stop optimizing for paperclips and instead trying to like worship God. So that is the kind of claim that Eliezer Yudkowsky and the strong orthogonality thesis is rejecting. But it's a good question, and if you don't read the article, then it's Ali is saying there's a lot of religious people who don't think this, and a lot of them who don't. There's a lot of religious people who don't believe that God physically exists, and that's of course totally true. But also a lot of people who believe that God exists.
That's not my claim. They might. This is sort of an irrelevant tangent, but it's stuff like, say, some religious people, like, I don't know, Calvinists, believe that you don't make a choice to believe in God or not. God essentially decides it ahead of time, or it already decided ahead of time. So there's no implication there that God would decide that the AGI would believe in him, or the ASI would believe in him, or a Calvinist.
Yeah.
So it depends on the religious framework.
It does, in fact. And there are a lot of religious people, like probably a lot more than Calvinists, for whom this kind of strong moral realism is not true. But also there are a lot of, like, I think in particular this about the physical reality of God is something that Islam does have, that God is truly there, and if you were smart enough you would realize that is in fact a claim in Islam, I think, without being 100% sure. To go back to what Nora's objection to this is, as far as I can tell, and I'm somewhat unsure about this, there's no extra difficulty in creating an intelligent agent. It seems like it's assuming that it's possible to create an AI where you can just slot in any kind of goal and it doesn't matter what it is. And so it's totally content neutral. And again, Nora is using this word totally content neutral, which is this kind of philosophical extreme, because I think that is probably true, but I also think that if you just remove the word totally and say like broadly in general, then the claim is a lot stronger. And of course, in the description of the strong orthogonality thesis, Eliezer Yudkowsky, and Bostrom for that matter, doesn't say that the orthogonality thesis is without exceptions. And I think like humans are to some extent this kind of content neutral reasoning engine, in that humans can make paperclips and we can make like many different things. Like what the final goal is maybe like a lot more philosophically complicated, but as like as instrumental goals, we can totally make paper clips, and we can totally make staplers, and we can totally make like many
but
things.
isn't strong functionality thesis explicitly about final goals?
Yes. So in this case, we are talking about whether it's possible to have an AI that is content neutral in the sense that it is capable of building many different things. And I think that is, in fact, a thing that both humans and probably a lot of AIs can do.
I would say if you restrict it to the set of AIs that are trained on human-generated data, things become different.
Yeah, and I think I would strongly agree to that. That in this vastness of mind space here, like we are very much not sampling randomly from this. Like, why would we do that? That seems like a totally crazy thing to do. So we are obviously using some very specific methods. We are doing gradient descent on like all the data that humans have produced. That's basically what we're doing, and that's of course going to, like, if we just did that and nothing else, then like I've totally specified an architecture, and then we get like 1 point here. In practice, we do a number of variations on that, so we end up a number of places inside this area. But so I don't know if we're building 3P AIs, probably all our large language models are probably in a much smaller area than these 3P AIs that you see here. We are hitting some really small goals. Well, we are hitting a really small area. So I strongly agree that this is just not the thing that we are talking about here. Like there's two things, like the orthogonality thesis, and then after that another kind of argument is needed, and I'm gonna get to that in just a moment. I'm just gonna reply to this next claim here, and that is that the knowledge and skills needed for molecular research are very different from those needed for being a house servant. So this is an example of this kind of content neutral AI that can both do molecular research and be a house servant. And I think humans are like constructive examples that it is possible for an agent to be general enough to do both. And humans are in fact much more general than that, because we can do these two things and we can do way more. So in that case, I think there is some kind of sense where humans can do most things, like most of the goals that you can explain to humans can pursue them in the same way we can pursue molecular research and be a house servants. So I think humans are extremely broad, not totally broad, but I think in general talking about totally is a distraction.
Okay, I think I get what's going on here. Mm-hmm. That Eliezer's argument is that given the vastness of mind space, any agent can have any goal, but Nora's argument is that in the set of all AI minds that we can possibly encounter in our quest to build AIs, that is not true, which I think Eliezer would agree with.
Yeah, and that I also would agree with, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the disagreement they have, but it's not really a disagreement.
Yeah. So I am in one of the next slides talking about this specifically. So I think not in this slide, but the next slide. So if you just bear with me. So here is the strong orthogonality thesis one more time. And Nora is making the claim that Bostrom's version was trivial, and the strong, if you're just talking about creating, well, that's false, and to some extent Eliezer Yudkowsky agreed with that. And if you replace creating with the existence, then it becomes unintelligible, or at least needs to be fleshed out some more. And Eliezer Yudkowsky does, in fact, in my view, flesh it out substantially. Like, it's a decently long article where he does provide examples. And Nora Belrose tries to interpret this and says one way of interpreting this is that it takes effort for the AI to exist, and there is no extra effort required if the goal is weird. And I think this is not the way Elias Yudkowsky intended. Like extra effort for the AI that would be to exist, that would be something like power consumption perhaps, but that's not what he intends. The two examples he gives are like philosophical difficulties rather than effort difficulties. And she agrees that actually this seems like a really strange claim, and yeah, that's why we say this, have the sentence like, I notice I am confused, because very often when people make what seems like a strange claim, it's because you don't understand it. Nora, unfortunately, at this point starts psychoanalyzing Elias Yudkowsky and trying to figure out what's going on inside his mind. In general, I think it's best to avoid this, but also, like, I've read a lot about a lot of Elias Yudkowsky's writings, and I've actually talked to him a couple of times, and every single time I've talked with him, his answer have been completely something I did not expect. Like, I would really not be able to like pass an intellectual Turing test with Elias Yudkowsky. His mind seemed to work in a really strange way. So psychoanalyzing him is not going to get us anywhere. So this is, I guess, the slide where we are talking about plausibility. And this is a Nora Belrose believes that the Elias Yudkowsky's arbitral article on the strong orthogonality thesis is trying to argue about plausibility, and I do not think that he's trying to argue that. Like, he's stating explicitly at the top, like, these are the premises that I'm trying to using the orthogonality thesis to argue for. And like, if you disagree with AI risk because you disagree with some later conclusions that this is not plausible, then you should not in fact argue at the early point, but argue at the point that you disagree with. So if you have a series of claims where A implies B and B implies C, and you disagree with the claim that B implies C, then you can't go and really criticize the article claiming that A implies B. And in this case, like, I think that the first claim is the orthogonality thesis, that it is possible in theory to build AIs that are not nice. And if you later claim that it will be the kinds of AIs that we are building will in fact tend to be nice, then you need to answer the counter arguments for that part. So, for instance, in Bostrom's book Superintelligence, chapter 11 talks about the challenges of indirect normativity, and I think, in fact, I may be wrong here, but I think that Nora Belrose's key point is that indirect normativity is going to be really easy and almost going to happen by default. And this is something where Nick Bostrom in chapter 11 of the book Superintelligence argues that there are a number of challenges for indirect normativity. And so this is the area where I think the actual disagreement is. And that's why she should attack this argument and not attack the orthogonality thesis, and try to make the orthogonality thesis talk about the AIs that we are actually building, because that part of the argument comes later. Lance Bush is also here actually as the host of this video, and when he hears this, there is no difficulty in the existence, and Nora Belrose being very confused and saying this is just unintelligible. So he notes, yeah, it sounds almost not grammatical, and is this something that could be improved? And Nora Belrose answers that he can't see this be changed in some way to make sense. And here I really appreciate that Lance is asking this kind of question, because like, if someone who is very respected and apparently is really smart is saying something that you don't think makes grammatical sense, then there is in fact a chance that you should spend some more time trying to understand it, right? And I think this is something that Nora Belrose should also cultivate the habit that if the other person is not making sense, then you should take a step back and consider the fact that it may in fact be that you're just not understanding it. And Lance asks Nora to try, and she does try, and she suggests that perhaps the point here is that deep learning is biased towards some simple goals. I'm not really going to go into this detail. It's not really relevant. The guess here is kind of incorrect. It's not in Bostrom's argument for the orthogonality thesis. It's not in Elias Yudkowsky's article on the strong orthogonality thesis, etc. Instead, we're going to go to talks about Shoggoths, where Nora Belrose claims that Elias Yudkowsky unironically thinks GPT-4 have a Shoggoth. I'm a lot less certain about this. Elias Yudkowsky has this written in big letters on his Twitter, that if there's a missing punctuation at the end of the sentence, then it's humor, and if you're not sure, it's also very likely humor. And trying to based on his Twitter figure out what is humor is a fool's game, right? And Nora Belrose objects to this kind of poetic communication, and I think basically she's right to object to that, and the thing you should do instead is to read Bostrom's book or read Arbital, for instance, which doesn't talk about Shoggoths.
Question.
Yeah.
Which tweet? Does she have a specific tweet she was referring to?
No, that's not as far as I could tell. I think, in fact, Elias Yudkowsky have made a number of Twitter posts referencing Shoggoths, but I am confused about whether he unironically thinks this or not.
I think his closest to his views I've seen that he's okay. So he sometimes talks about an actress playing roles as a description for ChatGPT, and I think he's probably not joking there. And that's somewhat similar to the Shoggoth picture, right? Where you have, this an alien actress playing a role, an alien actress with a mask. And if you compare that to a Shoggoth, that seems like a not crazy comparison. It doesn't necessarily mean that the alien is malicious or the alien is actually goal-oriented or whatever, but it is similar in the sense that it's an alien thingy wearing a mask playing a role, which is very similar to the Shoggoth picture. So I think I think Nora's claim isn't really that crazy.
No, I don't think actually it is crazy, and it may in fact be that Elias Yudkowsky truly believes that there is a Shoggoth inside GPT-4. I just don't think we should talk about this. I think the thing we should talk about is the actual claims on Arbital and inside Bostrom's book, because we will never get any kind of traction in a debate where we don't know this kind of basic facts, like does the person actually hold this opinion that he's writing?
Okay, fair enough. Sorry.
Sure, it's good. We'll have more. Please give comments today. Can we test for Shoggoths? Well, Nora Belrose said not really. It's really ill-defined what is a Shoggoth, and it's hard to put that into an explicit something you can put into computer code and test. And I agree in general. People are using Shoggoth as some way of pointing towards a really, really ill-defined concept, and our ability to find concepts within GPTs is really, really bad. And this is, however, also Nora Belrose's job. She's head of interpretability at Elioether. So if we can't find a good operationalizable concept from this, then that is in fact something that should give us pause and say, there seems to be something that many people think is important, and we can't figure this out. Maybe we should pause until we figure it out, or something like that. Another argument at this point is whether is somewhat unrelated to this, is that there is a great variation in human brain structures, but if you get blind, then you can still absorb human culture, and that's a positive example of some kind. And I think this is obviously true. And Nora makes a stronger claim that other weird kinds of trauma also don't prevent enculturation. And I think this is quite obviously wrong. There are a lot of ways human brains can break. And I think this is this seems like a lot of ways that human brains break does in fact have like many bad consequences. A third, also somewhat unrelated to this claim, is on behaviorism, where ultimately the thing we care about is behavior, and that in extremis this is of course right, but even though everything we care about is behavior, in general most people reject behaviorism, and in humans there are many different reasons. For AI, the thing we care about is the treacherous turn, because if you only look at behaviors, then the treacherous turn is an enormous change. Whereas if you don't have a behaviorist point of view, where you think about like, okay, inside the AI there is something like a goal that the AI is trying to hide from us and fulfill later and things like that. If you have this kind of model, which is like the standard model that I wouldn't say almost everyone, but the idea that humans have something like goals is really, really common, then something like the treacherous turn becomes really obvious. Lance have some more comments. I don't want to go into those. Instead, also about whether humans would just make stuff up, which Lance say obviously humans don't do that, and I think like humans do in fact make things up sometimes, right? That's not really important. Here's another question: can you, in theory, convince humans to only care about prime numbers? And again, we see, Nora says, in theory you could do that, but it seems really hard. And like I had a professor that once seemed like he only cared about prime numbers, but that's of course again we're being led astray by this total exclusivity, because there's a very big difference between only caring about prime numbers and mostly caring about prime numbers. And there are in fact like a lot of people whose behavior are very well explained by the fact that they only care, they seem to mostly care about something like prime numbers and understanding prime numbers in some way, and that's what they spend by far most of their mental energy and things like that. And of course in this case the thing we're actually talking about is it possible to make an AI that only cares about prime numbers? And that seems like an easily testable hypothesis, right? Because you can just ask GPT-4, pretend that you only care about prime numbers or proving the Riemann hypothesis or something like that. What action would you take in this particular situation? And then if GPT-4 can explain what it would do, then it seems quite reasonable that it's possible to do that, because you've basically done that. I couldn't hear you. I couldn't see your. It was only on the screen very briefly, so I couldn't read what you said.
Oh, I was just going to say that I would guess a skeptic would reply here that if you think that people who mostly care about prime numbers exist and they're not dangerous, then why the worry over an AI that mostly just cares about prime numbers?
Yeah, and this is like a somewhat separate part of this, but the answer is that they are in fact not dangerous except when they become extremely powerful. And once, if for some reason this professor that only cared about like prime numbers and seemed like a really, really strange person, if he suddenly became dictator of the earth, then I would expect things to be substantially worse, I guess, without really knowing that. So the problem is this combination of these goals with the potential for a lot of power. I agree that like a not strategically impactful AI that have these kind of really strange goals isn't really a threat, almost by definition.
I guess the issue here is that you're like, so I would assume Nora would say something like, as AI gets more intelligent, why expect that it becomes more like a coherent goal optimizer rather than just a very myopic maths professor who, if you try to make them dictator of the world, they would just sort of forget and go off and just start writing in a book about some ideas related to mathematics. So the point in contention here is that why assume the coupling between greater capabilities and this goal-oriented optimization stuff, right? That's, as we've seen earlier from Nora, she seems to think that this goal-oriented agent behavior is either incoherent, which seems way too strong to me, or it would make you worse at a particular task. And I think that that's still too strong for me, but that's her model, right? So in which case, I don't think you're centrally arguing against her point here.
Yeah, I think
her model.
Yeah, I would agree. We're not centrally arguing against Nora's model here. So I'm mostly answering the question on the left. But my answer to this is that I do in fact believe that more powerful agents will tend to become more coherent, and that they will, if they, as they become more intelligent, we will see that they will get this instrumental drive to like the math professor, for instance. He would probably not be capable of leading an organization that would get more knowledge about prime numbers. He would like to, but he's not very capable of that. But if he was more socially skilled, then he might start this kind of organization that would do this. And as the AI becomes more capable, it will become more coherent and it will take this kind of instrumental actions.
I don't necessarily buy the coherence argument, but I kind of get where Nora's coming from, where she prefers to think in terms of heuristics. She thinks in terms of like deep learning selecting for specific heuristics, as opposed to end goals, because it's like heuristics, I guess, would be better to operationalize in some terms. Like, it's more easy to like have use heuristics to explain the behavior of both like really low level AIs and animals and humans. Whereas with end goals, it gets kind of weird and sketchy under certain circumstances, because like you can ask a person what their end goal is, but then maybe that's not actually their end goal, and the whole discussion gets kind of confusing. So it's like, yeah, I can buy her argument that we're actually selecting for a large bundle of heuristics in our large language models, and that's what's going to drive the future behavior, especially, and that this trend will continue beyond the human level. It will continue until it will continue up to the ASI level. So what I think is that, how do we identify these heuristics? How do we make sure these heuristics map to what we think they map to? And how can we tell the difference between an AI that's like just acting human to make humans happy, and one that like actually values what it says it values? And we can't do that right now. Like we can't actually look at all of these heuristics because, well, there's God knows how many attention heads, and like, how do you operationalize the idea of a heuristic in terms of interpretability? So it's like, maybe Nora thinks these are easier problems, but like, I think this is essentially the same problem of how do we make sure an AI has an end goal that is compatible with humanity. It isn't a simpler version of that. It's basically the exact same problem, is my view of things.
So to give an answer to that, one example I would give would be AlphaGo, which is a deep learning system that has probably a large number of heuristics. Perhaps at some level it is a large number of heuristics. It is unfortunately also some heuristics that are too complex for humans to understand in any meaningful sense. And so instead what we do is we conceptualize AlphaGo and the behavior of AlphaGo as if it is an agent that has a specific goal, which is to win in the game of Go. And this provides a method of understanding the behavior of AlphaGo that is in fact very powerful. And if you want a lot of these heuristics are, and in particular if you get to a superhuman level, we would expect these heuristics to be totally opaque to us. Like, we can't look at AlphaGo and like figure out the actual heuristics, but we can look at it and say things like, it is probably going to try to win at Go.
I would say that because of the immense selection pressure, optimization pressure applied on AlphaGo, it's like explicit goal, because the optimization pushes all of its heuristics towards optimizing for winning at Go. So like it's a very special case. It may be the case that there's no like final coherent goal that even stable goal that say GPT-5 might have. It's just a bunch of heuristics, and like maybe at once it gets to particular places, like even if it's it becomes ASI, if you put it in certain environments, it like gets stuck and it just doesn't work and it doesn't become more coherent. But like that doesn't make it more safe. You still have the problems of like, are the heuristics actually compatible with humanity? So like I buy her argument that not necessarily every system becomes coherent, even if you add a lot of optimization pressure to it. But like, I don't think that suggests that system would be safe.
I think like we are probably roughly in agreement. Like my conceptualizations of the actual heuristics that make up like GPT, even GPT-4, is that they are totally impossible to understand, basically. Like if you have ChatGPT and you try to understand ChatGPT as an assistant that is trying to help you, you will be able to make a lot of predictions about ChatGPT's behavior at that goal level where it has you are conceptualizing it as having the goal of helping you. And if you think of it as a bunch of heuristics, then you can ask, okay, what are these heuristics? And if you try to enumerate all the heuristics of GPT-4, you'll just like, there's an enormous task and you can't understand it at all, and it'll just end up with nothing. The only way to, like, the only reason why we can use ChatGPT and think about it is because we have this prompt that pretends to give it the goal of being of pretending to be an assistant, right?
I mean, you can get coding performance from like even GPT-2 if you just like get really good prompt optimization, like have a bunch of computer code like that's structured in exactly the right way, and then like encourage it to write good code. You can do that. Like I don't think it is impossible to identify the individual heuristics, but like especially as we get to increasingly powerful systems, how they interact is going to become opaque. You can identify this low-level heuristics, but how they fit together, what predictions can you make about its behavior in an environment it's never seen before is a problem.
Yeah, I think we agree with this, and Ali suggests that since we agree, we should continue with the presentation and then maybe return to this afterwards, if you agree.
Okay.
So the next thing here, I was a bit confused at this point, so maybe I'm explaining this wrong, but it seems like Nora is saying that the AI during training will see nice human behavior, and that will make it disposed to care about the things humans care about. And that to me seems like we're anthropomorphizing way more. It might not care, it will like do the same thing, but will it actually care about this? I think there is this kind of is-ought thing here, and it seems like we're moving towards more realism, and I thought we were just moving away from that. So I'm somewhat confused at this point. And Lance have some more comments that I won't go into.
I will also say that there's probably more 4chan scrapes on the internet than there are people being nice to each other.
I'm not sure. I don't know. The next is on embodiment and vision. This is something they've been talked about a lot, and it seems like they're mostly talking about it in terms of capability, where Nora agrees it will improve efficiency. Not sure we really need that. I'm not sure that it's really true in the sense that, if that is true, then how come blind and lame people are generally intelligent if this is so important? But that's not really my main objection to this point. My main objection is the inconsistency in that when we were talking about recursive self-improvement, Nora was really confident that we would not see any significant algorithmic progress. And when she's describing some of the algorithmic improvements that Nora is optimistic about, she seems really confident that they will have a big impact. And this is the kind of inconsistency that I think is very deeply and centrally problematic. In general, this part of the video I'll go over quite briefly because I don't care about capability that much. I do care a lot about AI pause, and that is AI subject that Nora wrote about in the that we talked about at length this fall, I think, called AI pause will likely backfire. We see there's some discussion that is just rehashing the arguments from half a year ago. One of them was this idea of gradually lifting the hardware limits, which is something that I believe the original post didn't acknowledge, and that my proposal in my response video did include. So I don't know, probably other people also did that. She is rejecting that, saying that is still more discontinuous than never having any kind of hardware limit. And I would just point out that I did in fact make a proposal that didn't suffer from this problem. She's arguing that it requires a ton of international cooperation, and I agree, that's why I have a high P-doom. And she makes a lot of arguments from impracticality. Elisa Yudkowsky has this on Twitter, that a common argument against stopping the construction of the Doom machine is, you can't stop us, right? And I think this is in fact both true and somewhat morally sad. So this kind of pause, again, Lance is asking, what would the proponents of a pause say? And I really appreciate that he's saying this. And when Lance Bush asks this question, Nora basically comes up short and doesn't really give an answer to that. She instead says that if her probability of doom was 50%, she would still be against the pause. And I think this is the kind of claim that's, I think it's important, but I'm not really sure. I have a hard time evaluating this kind of claim. What does that actually mean? I think that if my P-doom changed, my actions would actually not change that much. I think if right now my P-doom is 95%, and I believe we should not build this AI. If my P-doom went down to 5%, I would still think we should not build this kind of AI. So my actual actions don't change that much based on that. I'm somewhat confused. One thing I do know is that if Omega comes from the sky and tells you that your P-doom is really wrong, then you need to re-examine your worldview. And that is totally one thing I would do if my P-doom changed this dramatically. Lance is making the claim that even if people thought there was 50% of doom, then they might still not be comfortable monitoring AI researchers. And I think people would totally be willing to do that. They do that with nuclear weapons designers and many other people.
This seems fine to me. I think that's what happens when you try and shape policy. I don't understand how it would reasonably be.
No, it's just that there's a fundamental difference between AI safety people and EA people. They mingle a lot, but AI safety people tend to focus a lot more on the technical stuff, and the people who, this is unfair, but people who are less good at technical stuff but still want to contribute generally go into policy. So policy is run by people who don't really understand the technical details, which is really mean and probably a very uncharitable and probably not actually true, but it's also somewhat true.
Yeah, I see where you come from.
Yeah, that seems like it's got to be the case, right? If you're not that good at technical stuff, but you're better at policy stuff, then you don't understand technical arguments as well. Okay, yeah, I agree. That just seems like it's got to be true.
And then there's the ultimate nightmare scenario of what if the same thing that happened to global warming happens to AI safety? Like what happened with global warming was like there was a systematic cabal of people unironically like trying to destroy geoengineering as a concept. Like there's this thing that we can obviously do to like reduce global temperatures, but like the movement is so messed up it manages to like suppress that and get the world to deindustrialize.
The AI safety, the global warming cabal hasn't in fact managed to get the world to deindustrialize. So
It did kind of get us to slow down in a lot of ways that I think were counterproductive. But
would agree. Yeah.
I guess my response to Lau Mein's claim here is that, I mean, things didn't go as, like, it's been about a year and a half since this stuff blew up substantially and came much more strongly into the public gaze. And it just hasn't gone that bad, right? Like, I remember people frequently talking about, well, if you try and talk about this stuff more in public, it's just going to make things go completely haywire, and then all sorts of bad things will happen. And I just think it hasn't gone that bad. Like, it's gotten a lot better than I expected it to do so. I think that what you're suggesting still seems possible, but I'm just less worried about it than I was.
I'm actually
3-4
really
years.
worried about the potential for liability to be slapped onto open source models, which would destroy the ability of AI safety researchers to do interpretability work. Because right now, if I wanted to like poke around the insides of something that's like even analogous to GPT-4, I had to like do it through open source models. Otherwise,
Yeah,
like
so that sucks. I agree. That is a definite cost. I think that I am a little more bearish on interpretability after seeing that it seems like it's accelerating capabilities more than alignment right now. Because my understanding is that Mamba was based off insights from interpretability research, and that seems like possibly a bigger win than any alignment-related win that we've seen so far from interpretability. That's just a bit bearish. I agree that overall it seems like a really good thing to be able to just mess around with models, apply alignment tests to them, and just share your results openly, right? Like that's generally how progress gets made.
and
So that
I would
seems like
say
a
that
reasonable worry.
yeah, and I would say that if that gets destroyed, the AI safety community, like there's like this core professional AI safety community, and then they gather a lot of people like myself around them who like try to get into the work and like get into the thing one step at a time and try to contribute a little bit. If you destroy open source models, that destroys that like large community that can theoretically be mobilized to do alignment work, because like if the timelines are like if we have open source models and we do interpretability work, we get 10 years, but we have like effectively 2,000 people doing alignment work versus if we don't have open source models, we get 15 years, but there's only 200 people doing the work.
I agree. It's a really hard trade-off, and like my high P doom is like
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it like that, and consider the accelerating effects interpretability has on capabilities work, then yeah, I can totally see why you have such a high P doom.
Yeah, you can the world doesn't have to be fair. Like it is in fact possible that disentangling capability and alignment work is just straight up impossible. There is no one promises it would be fair.
Oof. Well, yeah, this was a great discussion.
Yeah, like, the I think like obviously Nora is like one of the best interpretability researchers, and she would be expected to know way more about this. But I also feel the path from like better results in interpretability to existential safety is kind of underexplored. Like the I could conceptualize paths from getting a better understanding of what's actually going on inside these language models towards existential safety, but I could also like imagine a lot of progress happening that kind of looks really impressive, and then we still die anyway. Because
No, I can see us making it work. Like, imagine we have like a super speed eugenics program, right? Where we have like these really smart people, and like we're gradually bringing them to be smarter and smarter. But like then we do brain scans and we identify heuristics and what's going on in their brains, like to like to the degree that we could, if we could like actually just do interpretability work on say GPT-4 for like 100 years, if we could like do that, if we can identify each of those individual heuristics and like predict this person's behavior and genuinely understand them, I think we can get to a point where we get a person who's like considerably smarter than the smartest person who's ever lived, but like still not massively above humanity, and we can like interpret their brain patterns and like make sure that they're aligned with humanity, and then they can help like design to go the next step and the next step, and it somehow manages to work.
yeah, like this somehow manages to work. There seems to be like a lot of potential problems in this, in that like
I mean, it's like it's the same thing with like enhancing the intelligence of one of us, right? With an existing human being.
that's also something that
I
could go
don't.
wrong.
I think that is something that could possibly go wrong, but it seems like if you just ramped up, I don't know, things to the point where you have a million Frank Ramseys or John von Neumanns, that seems probably fine.
Yeah.
Like I'm much more optimistic about. Well, okay, I'm not actually. I'm much less of a doomer now, but
Maybe
I
not
think that
von
just
Neumann
doesn't seem.
specifically. He was kind of
Yeah,
he was kind of nuts in terms of starting nuclear wars.
and also
I mean,
like we are expecting that.
that was before. That was before the possibility of like large-scale thermonuclear war became a thing. Though.
Yeah, I know, but it's like
That
we
seems
had
like
a
it's not
million.
actually obvious to me that that would have been a bad move.
I know, I actually agree, but then it's like, you look at Russia with 100 million less people, and you're like,
I mean, who
are
says
we
it would be
really?
Russia with 100 million less people, right? Like you just hit the Kremlin and you're probably good.
I know, but it's like it's like it's not obvious that it would be a smooth, like in principle I agree with von Neumann's nuclear hegemony concept, but like also it's incredibly sketchy, and like if we're in a future where I knew something like that would happen and we had a million von Neumanns running around, I'd be like, I'm not sure this is going to end well.
Yeah.
Like von Neumann was just a human being. Maybe like he does some galaxy brain game theory thing and like we all die.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
And also one thing that I think Ali's example is somewhat misleading is that you're saying a million for Neumanns, which is like 1 in 8,000 or something like of the global population, where I'm imagining that we will end up with a situation where the amount of brain power available to AIs in total would dramatically outnumber the amount of like IQ adjusted hours or something like that.
Sure, but I thought we were just talking about intelligence enhancement for some reason. In fact, I'm not entirely sure why you were referencing intelligence enhancement, Lao Mei.
Oh, it's just like saying that that's roughly analogous to genetically breeding people for intelligence, which is roughly analogous to like getting really good interpretability tools and making sure that an AI's heuristics roughly match up with a human's heuristics, and like genuinely understanding like that system to be able to like make somewhat reasonable predictions in that
I
it will like not exterminate humanity.
I think that's like a really bad analogy for two reasons. First, because our interpretability tech for neural networks is just way better than our neuroscience tech for humans. I expect will, and I expect that to be continue to be true for quite some time. The other factor is that it seems like we have very good reasons to expect enhanced humans to use the same heuristics as humans because we've seen pretty intelligent humans and they sure do look like they have the same sorts of heuristics as the rest of us, right? But we haven't seen like uh, superhuman, well, above human AI yet, and we don't know what their heuristics, as you call them, would look like. So they seem like pretty disanalogous situations. I think that is more like, I don't know, if you got maybe M's and then ran them and then perhaps try to do something like intelligence augmentation on the end, then I think
I
you'd be able to
mean,
make a tighter
yeah,
analogy.
yeah. I
And
mean,
I feel
what
like
is a
that's
GP?
correspondingly less
What it? What is a GPT but an M?
that seems like it's smuggling in a lot of the
Yeah.
I know
a
it's
lot
not
of
a
the
serious
points under
argument.
contention, right?
Yeah, yeah. But like
Like
at the
if
same
you believe
time,
that, then that's a reason I think to be a lot more optimistic. Um,
I I think you can bully like a non-aligned GPT, oh, quote unquote non-aligned, like as aligned as GPT-4 is, you can get something like that to act like an M enough that you can actually do that at some point in the future.
That is a claim that is hard to evaluate. Uh,
Yeah, that really is because it's like there's a lot of assumptions there. Like, oh, this thing that can write way better code than human beings ever could, um, it appears to be performing at the level of a really smart but not genius human. Surely it won't like do something totally unexpected that like will have an unpredictable consequence that maybe it even doesn't understand. Because like we're
mhm.
going so off like
Yeah.
training data wouldn't be funny.
Yeah, and
You know
also
what we need to do? We need to write a lot of fan fiction about like M's and doing like augmentation in that specific environment. And then when you like, we need to like somehow find a way to get a worm to like include that in Rocket League paste bins, like Rocket League like data logs. That way, when those get scraped, it'll appear like a million times and we'll be fine. I'm only like
yeah, that seems like
90% serious.
that seems like a uh, 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 the kind of alignment strategy that um, like you have to go like all in on that, right? In the sense that if you have an alignment strategy like that, and you don't go all in on that, and you mostly like uh, you don't stop OpenAI from continuing to build GPT 6, 7, 8, etc. Uh, um, and um, so then this other aligned AI system, like these, would you call them, enhanced
Isn't
ones or
this
something like that,
isn't
will
this
just
isn't this
automatically take it.
Anthropic's isn't this what Anthropic is explicitly doing though?
Uh, I am in fact somewhat unsure precisely what Anthropic is doing. Uh, uh, so yeah, that's yeah. What precisely is Anthropic's like theory of
I
impact and theory
I
of
think they were
uh,
talking about
do they have
like
something?
having like reaching human level and then like using that as a module to like do further research. Maybe that's aloofer, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. It seems like to me that if you're trying to do something that is like dramatically off paradigm, then most likely what you're going to end up is something that is not going to be really competitive what's being done now, and that means that going off paradigm just means that you will, if you don't combine it with a really strong pause, then you don't actually get anything from building a very safe AI that's off paradigm and not competitive.
How do we know that's not what I mean, that's actually the default path for OpenAI, though. Like, they're going to get GPT-5, and if it's incredibly capable and capable enough to do AI research, they're going to have it like make next iteration and have it be safe.
Well, they're going there's two claims here. One is that they're going to use GPT-5 to build GPT-6, which is a totally reasonable claim. The other claim that they're building using GPT-5 to make GPT-6 safe doesn't necessarily follow, right? They could make it without like caring about safety.
I mean, they do seem to care about safety, or at least PR. Like,
Or at
they
least
do
PR.
have a safety. Yeah, I would say that there are people working there who like put effort into AI safety, because if they're at that place, they would know they're in the final stretch.
How would
Like
they know
that, it's real.
How would they know that?
That like if the majority of like effort being put in of like brain power being put into research comes from GPT itself, because that's like recursive self-improvement. Everyone there has heard of that concept.
Yeah. So, like, I would agree. Already now, it seems clear that there is a substantial amount of recursive self-improvement in that sense. Not for the actual key core tasks, but this is a thing that's already happening right now. And it's also
like,
really, really difficult to measure this kind of thing. Like, what kind of brain
I think
power
they
is more
would.
important?
I think they would notice when their core tasks are getting automated.
Sure. I think they definitely would. They would not necessarily tell us, and they would not necessarily pause particular, like this political battle within OpenAI that would then ensue when they decide whether they should pause, whether they should, like, how their reaction should be to this. It's not obvious to me what way it would go.
I mean, it's funny you were mentioning that, because wouldn't we observe exactly what we're observing right now? Like, no obvious progress, but they're obviously up to something.
Yeah, this is consistent with them, like, being in the middle of some kind of strong recursive self-improvement, but it's also consistent with them having hit a wall and everything in between, right?
And also, if they did hit recursive self-improvement, you can bet your bottom dollar that someone in there is going to start like talking about it, like not even intentionally like ratting them out, but just like some guy will just talk about it and be like, "Oh, isn't this cool thing we're doing really impressive?"
Didn't this literally happen today? Sorry.
What happened today? I don't know about that.
There was this guy Leopold or someone who leaked something from OpenAI and got fired over leaking some of the. I think that it did indeed happen today. I didn't actually look into this, but I think this is something that happened.
It happened in the last couple of days.
Okay, see, now I'm a little bit freaked out.
I don't think this is strong evidence either way.
They didn't say what he leaked, though. So they also claimed that, yeah, they didn't say what he leaked. So who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. It's like there's a lot of uncertainty here. There was also like this. You might have seen these memes with "What did Ilya see?" Right? Where people were discussing like with this board thing they had back in November, OpenAI. Like, was this safety related? And like people didn't really know anything, and we never really found out as far as I know. So like our epistemics from outside are just really really poor.
I guess, if I was a Galaxy Brains OpenAI lawyer, I can just say anyone who leaks information while we're in the final stretch explicitly does not get like their own galaxy and is locked in a basement forever.
I don't think that is the kind of thing that lawyers normally say.
Well, no, they don't say it because it's unenforceable, but like I assume that place is filled with galaxy brain decision theorists, so they might take it seriously.
Which place?
OpenAI.
Like
Why?
I'm not actually making an argument. I'm just trying to be funny. Well,
Oh, okay.
not, but actually, well, okay. I'm somewhat serious that like I would expect them to make a galaxy brain plot like that. Like everyone just all the engineers come to a room and be like, okay, we're in the final stretch. No one leaked this stuff to China. No one like takes this stuff and runs. No one tries to grab like humanity's endowments for himself. If you do it, and we do get to like the post scarcity future, you will not be included in it. You will have like 4 acres and a mule, and that's it. Like you're not going to be part of this. And I think that would actually be a big incentivizer because the people who work at AI tend to be true believers. Well, I mean, it's like I don't think that's a solid argument, but I could see something like that happening.
I could definitely see strange things happening in OpenAI. I think OpenAI is probably a very different organization from most Fortune 500 companies. So I would have a much larger error bars on my expectation of what's going on inside OpenAI. And that also makes it a lot harder for us to like make any strong predictions because like they could be, I don't know, everybody becomes convinced of Rocco's Basilisk 2.0 or something like that. Like it could go the other way as well, right? And that's of course like a serious problem that we really don't know this. We have no clue what's going on inside OpenAI, and that makes it really hard for us to give good policy recommendations because we are basically kept in the dark about some of the most important base facts.
All right. Well, now that we're nearing the end of this discussion, I would like to bring up to anyone watching this that I am still looking for a job in AI alignment, technical alignment specifically. So, yeah, like an internship, something like that.
Yeah, like I'm going to the EA GX Nordics in a couple of weeks. So if I hear someone who is hiring or something like that, yeah, and Ali is pointing out some kind of funding list, and that may be a better bet. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's also like AIsafety.com. I made a kind of we have a list of funders at AIsafety.com. So
that's it. The one I posted.
Yeah, I think it basically gets it from there. Cool. Yeah. Should we go through anything, or are we just gonna continue?
I had a couple points.
Sure.
So
continue. I would like to this one here. I think is important, but all the others, I know my explanation of irony possibly was bad. I think that is totally. I think that could be true. That I think it is ironic, and I think this is my explanation of why I think it's ironic. But irony is a really hard concept to pin down, and so much has been written about it, and I can understand that many people will think this is not actually technically irony or something like that. I think it is kind of ironic.
So I don't disagree with that per se. What I disagree with is the quote, or the supposed quote, I couldn't paint such a beautiful picture, but fortunately my trustworthy AI did it for me. That sort of is consistent with the interpretation that, and I think you said this, that the person in question is unable to think of a positive future concretely themselves, but just relies on their AI to do their thinking for them.
Yeah,
That's
that's not
the impression I got.
Yeah, and that's not really what Nora is doing. Of course, she's not like if the entire AI Optimists website was generated by ChatGPT. In that case, I think I would consider that ironic in that sense.
Yes. So I still think that it is, certainly from your perspective, our actions do count as ironic. I was just disputing the claim where you said that last quote. I just don't think it's a very... Not the quote, but I think what you said at that point in time just was not... The exact words you said were too strong.
It is in fact that my exact words were too strong,
So I have 2 points. Number one, I genuinely don't think it's ironic. And I think you spending that much effort on arguing it's ironic is like kind of sad. Okay, that was mean. Okay, sorry. And second of all, it's begging the question. You're assuming that because the audience agrees with you, then the whole thing is ironic. But if the audience agrees with Nora, then it's not ironic. It's just normal. So it's like, where's the irony?
From my point of view, it is ironic.
Yeah,
the original claim is,
Nora...
from my point of view, this is ironic.
I think the fact that we have to explain this joke for like 10 minutes means that it's a bad joke.
Sure.
No, I think I got the joke.
Yeah, she did in fact.
I mean, I got the joke, but it's just not very good.
Yeah. But I think she did. And the fact that she did ask is, reason enough to explain a joke. If someone asks.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Fair enough.
But again, this isn't really the central thing, and I would like to. This perhaps here is.
So, I've been meaning to talk about that.
Because I think this was in fact more interesting, and I would. I'm a bit sad that I didn't have time to.
I think she's just wildly misinterpreting what people mean by co-realism. Yeah.
I feel like she flipped a switch in my brain where I'm like, okay, go realism is optional. It might be that the bundle of heuristics doesn't end up like becoming more what's the word? High resolution, effective, like coherent. Yeah, coherent. That's the word. It might be that heuristics don't become coherent, but like I don't think that really. I think that shifts the alignment from final goals to heuristics, which doesn't make it easier.
I think it sort of does, because it does suggest that you don't get things like deceptive alignment by default. You wouldn't necessarily expect a sharp left turn. It does suggest that like these things might be difficult to, like it might be hard to reason about what exactly they're going to do. It might also be tricky to, like if you don't know what you're putting into the systems, if you don't really understand the training process, and they wind up with a bunch of heuristics that are potentially dangerous that you never realize you put in there, that is one thing, right? That's still like cause for concern.
Yeah.
But it's just not the same level of concern, I think, that you'd have if you think you get goal-directed agents as a default.
To me, in some
goal-directed agents are just really scary.
Yeah, but also like to me, it feels like the difference between, like, if you imagine you have a super intelligent paperclip maximizer, which has the explicit goal of maximizing paperclips, and then you have an agent that is extremely similar, and always does the same thing. It just doesn't have a goal slot. Instead, have a lot of heuristics which turn out to do precisely the same thing. Like if it ends up taking the same actions, then it's almost as dangerous. Not quite as dangerous, but like almost as dangerous.
I mean, if it takes exactly the same actions, then it is exactly as dangerous.
Yeah, we imagine that the heuristics don't precisely end up with the goal. So yeah, like so you have a number of so it's this super intelligent paperclip maximizer is trained in one case it's like specified with there is a goal slot and we put paperclips into the goal slot, and the other way it's trained with a bunch of heuristics using deep learning, and it ends up in actually doing very much the same things but not precisely. And I think in this case I would expect the goal oriented to be more dangerous, but the heuristically to be also very dangerous.
Actually, you know what? I think I kind of get her point now, in that if you get a consequentialist goal realism AI with like a slightly different goal than what you intended for it, things can go really, really wrong. I think that's a classic Eliezer Yudkowsky doom argument. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. It can go really, really wrong. I also agree that I think it can go wrong in many other cases. But yeah, I think if you
but do you agree that's like the original Eliezer Yudkowsky "this is how things go wrong" argument?
very original, yeah, sure, 2005
Okay.
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how he's updated. Anyways, but then with heuristics, it's like human beings have different heuristics than each other. We also have like intended final goals for all the atoms in the universe that are vastly different from each other. But like the end result is we expect that other human, that like if we give any particular human total power over the universe, things will like get better and not worse for the average human being, which is what we're looking for with AI in the first place. So it's like because of that, we can reason that human beings are more heuristics. It can be better described as heuristics. Oh, is that a good argument? There's something there. And I need to think about it more.
Yeah, but like,
what do you think?
I think to some extent humans sometimes operate on a like not that reflective level where we're mostly doing heuristics, and sometimes humans like sit down and think really hard about their goals, and they operate in a way that is like much closer to the rational idea of a coherent agent.
I mean, it's like the thing is, sitting down and thinking really hard is your heuristics debating each other. It's your heuristics interacting with each other and finding like an outcome that's acceptable to like as acceptable as possible. And the actual result of that is like some kind of epistemic humility where, you know, despite different heuristics among different human beings, we still expect that if we give any particular human being total power over the universe, things will get better for most people. I think there's something definitely there. It might be like what Nora thinks, or maybe it's just me.
I am in fact somewhat in doubt about precisely how Nora thinks about this. Like, to my mind, when you get towards when you have a large number of heuristics, to some extent, like an example of a very large number of heuristics is a lookup table, right? A lookup table is a enormous set of really easy, simple heuristics.
Well, I mean, moral intuitions are what we base morality on, and those are heuristics.
Yeah, but if we go back to the lookup table, then in practice, having an enormous lookup table is not going to work at all. Like you need to have stronger heuristics than that, because like the classic Chinese room argument that the book just becomes too large. So if you have a large number of as these heuristics become more and more complex, they start to resemble goal-seeking behavior more and more. Like if you imagine,
Sure.
to some extent, you can imagine like the goal-seeking behavior is like a single heuristic that just say move towards the goal, and then you can split that up into many heuristics that kind of fits towards the same thing, and you could split it out to an extreme number of heuristics that kind of do the same thing. So
But those that's not actually the heuristic that's going on in human beings, though. I mean, you can model it that way, but that's not what's actually happening. Because, like I said, with the example of, human beings being having different goals, but like mostly wanting good things for each other.
like I'm not entirely sure. Like it's not totally obvious to me that my brain doesn't in fact work this way. That I have a number of heuristics that are debating within my brain all the time, and sometimes like cohering towards some kind of plan. That may in fact be how people's brains work. We are getting somewhat off track here. I'd like to probe the other question. What difference do you expect between scheming and non-scheming AI? So the question I would pose, Nora, in your stead, is imagine that you have a world where large language models always scheme, and a world where large language models never scheme. What would be ways to tell if you're one world or the other?
You can lay traps. Like if the AIs aren't intelligent enough, you'll eventually catch them in a trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I would be, it'd be puzzling if the AIs were scheming all the time, and unless they've coordinated or something. I mean,
I mean, like by that I mean like an AI that's willing to scheme, an AI that when it's advantageous for it to scheme, will at least consider it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, all humans are schemers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Then I guess we just live in the world where all AIs are schemers. But then it's like,
kind of bad.
but it's like it's weird because I feel like we're using the wrong definitions here.
Mm-hmm.
What is a scheming AI? What is a non-scheming AI? GPT is uniquely bad for this because like its behavior is erratic and it's simulating agents. But at the same time, if we do get to AGI, it may well be with something that's that messy. So, oh Jesus, yeah, I mean, it's going to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
If it's GPT-5, it's still going to be messy. And there's enough space in the messiness for scheming agents to appear some of the time. I guess that's a proof.
Yeah. So my thought is that if we're assuming, of course, scheming doesn't really make sense at a very low intelligence level. Like you can be too stupid to scheme, and that's part of the asterisk that I have on the all in the text box, that you need to be reasonably smart to scheme.
Counterpoint, like if you have selection pressure in the environment, you can still get like mimic butterflies.
That is true. But my claim is that any human who is like in the top, I don't know, 1% or something like that, who is presented with a situation where scheming is from some kind of from some point of view, the right choice will scheme.
Yeah, and guess what GPT is trying to do?
Yeah, and I think you would expect that all language models in all situations where it seems like it is the correct thing to scheme would also scheme. So that's my view that Mhm.
What if you use like RLHF to punish schemers?
Well, if everybody is schema and we don't understand schema and we can't make a
Well,
single
it,
AI that's not schema.
it's like there is a person. People act in good faith some of the time.
Yeah, sure.
If you select for AI agents that act that way, like the concept of acting in good faith is present in GPT. If we select consistently for that, we might get a thing that consistently acts in good faith, and that might be close enough to non-scheming.
So how
That might be what we're looking for.
So the only areas where you can truly test this is if the AI has an ability to take over the world, right? That's the only place where you can truly distinguish schemers from non-schemers.
Why do you? I'm sorry, I don't understand why you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say that you're trying to make to distinguish between schemers and non-schemers, so you can do RLHF, and you are not willing to give this AI the ability to take over the world. In this case, both the schemers and the non-schemers will not try to take over, right? So you will be able to distinguish them.
How about this? Just over the course of training, you keep trying to like lay weird traps. Like when it's at a stage of training where it's just not that smart yet, you make these traps, and every time it falls for one of your traps, you like, because it exhibits scheming behavior, you like do RLHF to get rid of that behavior. The question is, at the end of it, is it possible for it to because like the scheming tensor, the act in good faith tensor, is like an actual thing you can find inside it. Like it's such a common concept though. Like acting in good faith. Like most people act in good faith at least some of the time. So it's like it's such a compact idea that I would expect you to find it arguably faster than like some kind of Machiavellian thing.
Yeah, sure. You would find one. Would you find them all?
What do you mean?
Like I am worried that if you do interpretability and you find something like a deceptiveness neuron or something like that, and then you do RLHF against that, then you will get a new agent, and that agent may in fact still be deceptive. It's just deceptive in a way that you can't detect.
And I'm saying like that there's probably like some kind of act in good faith neuron or more of them, and it will like encourage it to act in good faith, such that even if like lying neurons are activated, it will like try to tell you that it's lying. Or something vaguely like that. I think this is something we can actually try to do with interpretability work.
Yeah. I think, and I do believe that it is in fact a substantial part of the good part of interpretability to try to figure out, are models deceptive, and like my understanding is that we are making really slow progress in that way, but non-zero progress, much too slow to actually be able to like really do something. But this is probably an area where Nora knows way more than any of us. The kind of feelings that guys I get is that this is very difficult, and we're probably not gonna get it. But I don't actually like have a really strong model of this.
And just regarding what Nora actually wrote, I would just say, like, One scheming AIs have considerably worse on distribution performance though. Like if you give it actual real world, like actual tasks that we give to GPT and we train it with actual data we give to GPT, like it can, it would be weird if you couldn't like get GPT to act like a schemer some of the time because there's so much of it in its data and it's like its RLHF process kind of like encourages weird sycophantic behavior that borders on lying and like deception by omission and stuff like that. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think a major thing is just that like there's like no that at the end of the day we're going to be working with simulated agents that GPT throws at us, and we can't like just go down a layer. We can't just say, oh, the model itself it wants X. I think what we can't make predictions about agent behaviors based off of that. We have to actually work with these simulated agents, and it's like maybe that's really easy in certain senses, but maybe that makes it harder in other senses.
Yeah. This is an obvious problem that, like, I would expect Nora, like, Nora knows way more about interpretability than we do.
Yeah.
So, this is, yeah. So, I think to a substantial extent, it makes sense for us to defer to Nora. If Nora believes that we can detect scheming with black box lie detection or linear probes, which shares some links here, and I think then we would need to like. I can't really. I don't have a basis for disputing that claim that black box lie detection is going to be possible. The only thing I can do is I can see, okay, does that research actually pan out? And then we can see in like 2 years if people haven't been able to like reliably tell if ChatGPT is lying or not. Well, then that means that these methods probably did not pan out, right?
Maybe at the end of the day, like there's still the messiness of it all, like the sheer insanity of getting a next token predictor and like and like getting it to LARP as a Nigerian LARPing as like a high class Nigerian LARPing as like an AI that's a friendly assistant. Like this is actually what happens. This is actually what happened. They actually did this in real life, and that's how we got to GPT-4. Like, and then it's like the sheer messiness of it all, and the fact that there are people who say we can make mathematically proven predictions about their behavior. Like, I think people actually say stuff like that. I'm not as confident.
Yeah, neither am I. So I'm thinking, move on. Are we basically finished, or there anything else we want to talk about? Because otherwise, I'm thinking of going to bed.
Let's just go through all the slides.
Yeah. So let's see.
Are you going through all the slides? Oh, I'm bailing out then
Yeah.
because I think it's time for me to go.
Yeah.
I think we're pretty much at the end anyways.
Yeah. So.
Oh, and by the way, I posted the links she sent me.
Yeah, I saw that. Great. Yeah.
Soren, just want to say thank you for one, doing this, and two, just taking I'm not going to call it abuse, but just taking all of the critiques very well. You just it's a lot of work that goes into it, and just like you shouted out Nora, I just wanted to shout out you. You did an awesome job.
Yeah, I think that this is something that I feel my tone is more adversarial here, and I did in fact in the beginning kind of apologize in advance of that, because I felt my tone is in fact much more adversarial than I'd actually like. Okay. I don't really know, because I do in fact feel strongly adversarial about this. Like,
about which part in particular?
About the overall thing that Nora is doing. I think Nora is making an enormous moral error, and I think she should really not be doing the thing that she's doing.
And by that you mean just like saying that she has a low P doom and making arguments publicly about why a low P doom is justified?
No, the thing that she should be doing is totally this is perhaps what I'm also trying to say here, that the thing that she is doing in trying to both do interpretability research on this and on and trying to like explain the arguments is really good, and she's doing way better than all the others. But the others are actually doing something that is really bad. Like, if for instance you are an engineer that is working in OpenAI and expect that you are going to like kill everybody and you're just doing it for the money or something like that, then I think you are in fact a bad person. So I think that Nora is much better than the guy in OpenAI who is doing it for the money and expects he'll kill everybody. But that's really faint praise, right? So I think Nora is like, the things she shouldn't stop is to look into these arguments, right, and try to figure out what is actually true. The thing I think Nora should stop doing is like trying to build this doom machine. I think she should like pause instead.
How is she building the doom machine? She's doing interpretability work.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, yeah,
she's a small
I get your point. I get your point, but like actually applying that advice, if everyone in her position does that advice, you know,
yeah,
I mean,
like I
don't want to make a sports metaphor, but I think you know which one I would make.
Yeah, like I can see the point. If you go to an organization and you find the most moral person in an organization and you convince that person to stop being in that immoral organization, then the actual result from that might be that organization will be more immoral by removing the most moral people.
No, I actually disagree with your premise here. I think like her like contribution is net positive, because at the very least she convinced me about the heuristics versus end goals thing. I think that's actually really important, because most AI safety people were like influenced one or another by Eliezer Yudkowsky's like paperclip maximizer, like something with an arbitrary goal is the danger, even if that arbitrary goal is only slightly different from human goals. Like that's something he says a lot. I think he still says it, and it's like what most people, well, not most necessarily most, but a lot of people base their thinking on AI safety on. And I just think that she's doing an absolutely enormous service by like having this alternative way to think about the concept that is heuristics.
And this is the kind of thing that she should continue to do. The thing that she should not do is do capability research, right?
But she does interpretability work.
Like this is for like a capability organization, and like there, to me it seems pretty obvious that she is pushing towards capability much more than like she's not pausing at all. I think at least that is my interpretation of what Nora is actually doing. Like, I don't really have a full picture of, like, it is certainly possible that Eliezer AI in fact in the background is a sponsor of Pause AI. I don't know all these things, but it seems to me pretty obvious that she is her it is pretty hard to figure out precisely what the impact is, but I think the expectation is that a lot of the Eliezer AI, as far as I can tell, have produced substantial capability work in the past.
Have they?
Yeah, that is my like I think I've seen some of their names mentioned as some people who were like able to get pretty good performance out of some of these early open source models. That's actually like when I looked into that, that was like 2 years ago, where they seemed like they were very close to the forefront of open source capability research, and I think they are still pretty high up there.
But didn't you also say that they were like holding back really frontier models at some point?
Elioitha? No, I don't think I said that.
Maybe that was Anthropic.
It's possible Anthropic has been doing that. It's actually really hard to tell whether who is doing that.
Oh crap! Maybe it was conjecture. I'm very confused right now. Yeah.
I think in general, Elioitha is pretty like bullish on trying to. I think the overall impression I get from Nora's work is that she believes that capability and alignment are very strongly positively correlated, in that if you build a more powerful AI, it will automatically be safer, which is obviously true for mundane safety, but also for like existential safety.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
think that's an important claim. Like I think that captures her thoughts. She seems to be leaning in that direction, and that's very that's very important. If you think, I don't know if she implied it or explicitly stated, but that strong form of moral realism that you referenced in your presentation, it sounded like she subscribed to it to some degree. I might be wrong. That intelligence, increased intelligence necessarily leads to strong, like more moral reasoning.
I don't think she would agree that just intelligence necessarily leads to a better moral reasoning, but I'm sure she would say
I
that
think
the way we are doing it right now, increasing the capabilities, are ones that expose the AI to way more examples of like what human want, and that will cause it to much better understand what we want, and will somehow and this is the part where I disagree, cause it to be more moral.
Okay. I see.
or maybe something like during the LHF process, we will naturally find, agents that are more helpful, and like it would be kind of weird if, that maybe her idea is that we're selecting for heuristics, so like, I don't know. I think we should ask her these questions explicitly.
Well, I think I would much rather ask her like this question, right? Like, what do you feel about like Bostrom's actual arguments? Like, for instance, with this, like, how difficult is indirect normativity, right? It seems she expects that you would get that basically for free. That you show the AI a lot of examples of humans doing nice things, and then the AI will just automatically internalize that and get some heuristics that will end up pointing towards doing nice things. And this, I don't know if that is a fair description of Nora's views.
I mean, I think she believes that for like a in a non-moral sense, like the like GPT-4 obviously understands what moral behavior is, or what acting in good faith is. Like these concepts are located within GPT, and I think her idea is it's going to be easy to select for them just in the course of getting a more useful AI assistant.
And I mean, this is totally fair, right? And then the obvious question is like, okay, and then Bostrom gives some problems with this kind of arguments, like saying that, okay, yeah, you get these heuristics, but then as the agent becomes smarter, it might want to become more coherent, and maybe able to like self-modify to become more coherent because that's in its interests. Is that a thing that would happen? And like Nora probably would have some answer for that. I expect.
I think she just doesn't think that like that bag heuristics necessarily becomes more coherent, and I don't really see a good argument for it either. I mean, I've seen other people talk about it, who are generally quite doomer, and what they say is something like, well, the ones that get more coherence like are more competitive compared to other agents. Like you can expect a coherent agent to be better able to play the stock market, but like we're not. Are we actually selecting for that, or are we selecting for like agents with good vibes?
I think to some extent we are selecting for like the best performance, where performance is described in like it's a very wide term because we are selecting on a lot of different parameters, but we are selecting for performance, and that is totally a thing people want, and like people obviously want AIs that can earn a lot of money on the stock market, right? So of course they're going to build that. So my point is really that these are the kind of arguments that Nora, this video was called like talking about the orthogonality thesis, but she posted it on less wrong as deconstructing Bostrom's argument. And my core objection was that she's not really presenting Bostrom's argument in the way that Bostrom is presenting it. She's presenting a much weaker and very different argument than Bostrom does, and then she's attacking that. And I think if that doesn't justify having like the title Deconstructing Bostrom's Argument, and I would prefer that she, laid out Bostrom's argument more faithfully and then attack that. Because some of the examples that she gives, like for instance, you can argue against fast takeoff, and I think that is a very reasonable thing to do, but Bostrom's argument for Doom doesn't depend critically on a fast takeoff. It is very possible to have a slow takeoff and still get Doom.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Listen, I'm really tired.
Yeah,
I need to go like right now.
Going to bed now. So yeah, see you in 13 days. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Perfect.
Right.
Great.
Nora, do you know what the next reading is yet?
Yeah. I haven't. I think. No, I haven't actually figured that out. Like, I'll give this presentation.
I'm sure that you're, discussing your talk,
Yeah.
giving feedback. I'm sure that's going to take most. I assumed that you weren't planning on having a reading.
Yeah, I'm thinking, like, if something good comes up, I'll try to find something. But most likely, you don't need to prepare anything, and I'll just give like 15 minutes before, and then 8 minutes, and then 15 minutes more, or something like that. I don't know how long.
No worries. And one thing I just wanted to float as a potential like discussion to have. I'm curious about the open source debate. Laumain made some points in favor of it. I've heard Jan Tallinn be in favor of it, and then there's others who are a little more skeptical. And I'm curious if you have any recommendations, or if there's anything new. It seems like a pretty important debate, and it's kind of happening right now.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. To what extent this should be open sourced? I don't have a very strong model of this. I do have some thoughts, but at the end of the day, I'm confused about which has the lower PDOOM. The world where we like forbid open source, and the ones where we mandate it, and the ones where we do like we do now.
Agreed. But I also assume that there's people who are overly confident on both sides of the debate. I'd love to hear them.
This is totally a thing that a lot of people are exceedingly confident in this, and it's just really hard to predict the future.
But yeah, I won't take up more time. Thanks for a good discussion.
It's been a great discussion, yeah. See you in 13 days.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks. Bye.